Hey everyone, Devin Greer here. I'm starting a new video series where I'm going to be reviewing Linux distributions that aren't necessarily the big guys. So we're not going to be doing any reviews on Ubuntu or OpenSUSE or Fedora, um, Arch, anything like that. What I'd like to do is review distributions that are what we often refer to as the boutique distributions. And what we have in front of us today is Elementary OS. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, well, dude, Elementary OS has had a ton of reviews. I don't personally think that Elementary OS has had fair reviews. And that's why I'm going to cover it today, as I believe that there's a lot of things that haven't been covered in Elementary OS. So let's go over the basics. We'll cover the good, the bad, and I'll tell you where I really stand on it. And it's a good way, if you're curious about moving to Elementary OS, or you know someone you want to move to Elementary OS, this is a good way to get you kind of a grasp, because like I said, a lot of people who review this thing, they only cover the goods. They cover the, and then the bads they do cover, unnecessary. But the goods they cover is like, hey, look, I stuck my mother in front of it, and watch, she can do it. Or, hey, look, it's all artistic looking, so it's awesome. That's not what we're going to review this like a real Linux distribution, and we're going to sit down and say, can this be done? Now, there's three kinds, in my opinion. Now, there's subcategories, of course, but you have three real kinds of Linux distributions. For starters, you have consumer grade, which is like Ubuntu or Linux Mint. You have enterprise level, which is either used for enterprise testing or just it's enterprise grade distro like CentOS or like OpenSUSE. Or you have the advanced distributions, like Arch Linux and Gentoo, which could technically be made consumer grade, but you have to have the know-how to do it all. I think we all agree that Elementary OS is it's consumer grade. So for those reasons, that we have to set an expectation. So the installer uses a standard Ubuntu installer for 12.04, real easy to use. We get here to the desktop. This is Pantheon, is the name of the desktop. A lot of people make this big mistake that Pantheon is actually based on GNOME. It's actually not. It is its own separate desktop. Now, that could bring good or bad, just depending on who you are, and we'll kind of cover that here in a minute. But the thing is, it's super fast, super light. It has a great set of applications. You have a search here, so you can look at all sorts of applications. It's its own desktop, but it still brings some of the Ubuntu in it. For example, this looks a lot like the system settings in Ubuntu. It rebadges a lot of applications, so this is the movie player. It's essentially all it is Totem. But they renamed the application, and they did certain things to hit within its cosmetics. For example, you'll notice there is no minimize button. You can either close it out, you can expand it, shrink it down, very OS X-like in design. You can right-click to minimize. A lot of people I've seen when the Linux Action Show reviewed this, they forgot to mention that, you can't minimize them. Yes, if you right-click, you get additional functionality out of your app. Now, one thing I'll give Pantheon, it is the best OS X clone I've seen to date. Now, some people may be like, dude, that's a slam. Not really. For years, I've watched people try to build an OS X-like desktop in Linux, and the most common thing was either XFCE with Docky, which if you don't know what Docky is, it's a lot like this. It's a dock that you could load applications into. Or people would build custom-looking themes for XFCE to make it look exactly like OS X, but it was always very glitchy. There are differences. Like I said, like here, this remains as application. So if I open up the music player, which I think is just X noise, I think that's all this is. They make it very iTunes looking, but it's just X noise. This, in OS X, this would typically the taskbar at the top would change to meet the criteria of the app, whereas this does not. So, in a sense, like I said, some people would say I just slammed it, but reality, no. For years, we've been trying to build our own OS X looking like themed desktop. Here you go. This is the closest you're going to get, and it brings a lot of functionality. Now, something that's interesting about Elementary is the fact of the default application choice. Firefox and Chromium have always been a standard. They chose to use Midori, and I believe that's because they helped build Midori. It ships, I believe, with the latest version of Midori. I believe so. Yep, 0.5.6. Now, Midori isn't a very fast-paced development, so we're not going to review Midori, but there we go. For applications, you get it from the Software Center, which is the Ubuntu Software Center. Now, you can look at this as an up or down, really. You know, the thing about Elementary OS is it brings consistency, or so they claim. That's the thing they say that's missing from Linux is the consistency of applications. This allegedly brings consistency. Now, the Ubuntu Software Center kind of ruins that idea. However, it's not always such a bad deal. And what I mean by this is if you're the type of person who is, say, invested in the Ubuntu Software Center, I'm not consider myself highly invested, but I do have some investment. Like, I have Torchlight and a couple other games purchased from here. So, like, yeah, the Software Center, it's kind of nice. I can switch over to Elementary OS if I chose to, and I can still use the games that I bought with Ubuntu. Downside is in the future they've talked about building their own app store where paid apps could be available, but I don't know if they mean that will be through Canonical. I don't know if that will be a partnership that they'll venture on with Canonical so they can continue to offer all those applications, or if you're going to lose that Ubuntu support that you normally would have, and you'll have to start over. So, but, you know, and to be honest with you, in my opinion, when I've ran this on native hardware, this Software Center feels like it runs better in Elementary OS than it does in Ubuntu. So, definitely not too bad. So, we'll close out. So, I mean, basics, right? I mean, it's an attractive-looking desktop. I would say it's fast 95% of the time. Every once in a while, I would hit an area where it like really bogged down, and I'd check my system resources. Still have tons of resources. There's nothing to explain it, and a simple reboot would fix it, which could be kind of a deal breaker for myself because really, I don't use Windows. You know, that's a Windows thing. It bogs down, reboot it. I use Linux. I could run Ubuntu for like a week straight before I need to restart it. But like I said, 95% of the time it's good. You know, it's elegant, it's great. So why don't we, you know, it's like, well, what's the bad? So let's head over, let's open up the terminal. Now, I am not a stickler on kernel version. You know, the way I look at a kernel is like this, okay? If I can have the latest hardware support on an older kernel, I'm perfectly fine with that. I am not the type of user who sits down and is like, dude, we you know, oh my god, Linux kernel 3.15 is out now, which I believe is the most current one, and I'm running on Linux kernel 3.2. Lame. However, here is the problem. The notebook that I have, that this is all running on, that you're witnessing, is a Lenovo IdeaPad Z510 notebook, 15-inch, with a 4th gen Intel 4700MQ processor and Intel HD 4600 graphics. Linux kernel 3.2 does, the generic kernel, does not offer driver support. Now, for those of you who are like, crap, it will install, and everything will look like this, but you will not have, say, like 3D graphics acceleration. And, like, the flickering cursor might be because of this as well. I don't know. Now, there is, if you head over to the, if you're unsure of where to find it, you can head over to their Google Plus community, because Elementary OS does not use a traditional form, and they can send you over to the Ubuntu official Ubuntu page on how to install updated kernels. But there's a couple problems. I tried to do that because I tried to run this natively on my laptop, and the moment I did that, when I tried to reboot, the Elementary OS logo popped up and then the screen went black and it was done. So it actually ended up breaking the system. And furthermore, the developers are very opposed to you doing this because of stability reasons. So let me explain this to everybody. The current version of Ubuntu that's out for 12.04 is 12.04.5, which I believe ships with the 3.10 kernel, maybe newer. Last time I checked, it was 3.10. 3.10 has 4th generation Intel product drivers built into the kernel. Don't get me wrong, the ones on 3.13 that's in 14.04 are more up to date and far better, but at least you would have your basic support there. The problem is the Elementary OS developers are too lazy to basically test it themselves. So they're leaving it up to the user, and if it breaks, oh well, they're so busy building their next release, they do not have time to maintain the older release. So that's my big complaint right there. When you're building a consumer grade distribution, you need to support hardware, especially it's not like 4th gen Intel products launched yesterday. They've been out, I think, for like a year now, if not more, or a little less. And to sit down and say, well, it's a stability matter, well, it's running just fine in 12.04.5. When you say stability, you mean you would have to, it may not be stable with the new versions of X that it will, the new versions of the X display server with Pantheon. And that means you would have to actually do some work to integrate it properly. And they don't want to do that. So, if you have new hardware, if you're like me and don't believe that Linux is only there to revive old machines, Elementary OS may not be your guy. They really don't seem to care on making sure that you can run their operating system on their latest distribution, or on their currently supported distribution, despite what they're being based off of does. Like I said, they sit down and say it's stability. It's not stability. It just means they would have to go back and actually do some work. Another complaint I have, let's open up Geary here and I'll show it. And of course, Geary wants me to set up an email account. Okay. Well, I'm not going to do that. Actually, I think I can show my point through the Software Center. So Geary is a default application. I run Geary in Ubuntu. However, and that's fine, but default applications receive a different grading criteria. Okay, so here we go. We have Geary, and if I click on it and then click on more information, one of the things we'll notice for Geary, when we scroll down here in a minute, is Geary is on version 0.4.2. Okay, Geary is actually to date on version 0.6.1. That's what I'm using on Ubuntu. It's the latest version of Geary. What I'm basically getting at is your default applications. You know, if you're trying to build a boutique and you're building it off Ubuntu, you have to set the standard. I understand Ubuntu does not update all of their core applications, even though, believe it or not, they do update quite a few of them. I just got an update for Shotwell like 2 weeks ago. However, this is unacceptable. So essentially, Elementary OS does not update their kernel. They do not update their core applications. From what I can tell, all they've done is set updates from canonical to the core system, with the exception of things that will break Elementary OS. So like security fixes can be applied. I don't know about you guys. For me, this is a deal breaker. This is a huge deal breaker. It's one thing, I mean, don't get me wrong, Elementary OS is based on 12.04, so the software is naturally going to be a little older, and that's fine. That's fine. This isn't targeted at bleeding edge people. This is actually hardly even targeted at Linux users. This is targeted at people who are on Windows and Mac OS X who wanted to come to Linux, but they didn't feel that there was a desktop out there that was easy enough. That's what this guy can do. Okay, and I mean, there is some nice little customization features. You can really set it up however you want, but the problem is they're building this. They're building the distribution, as in like, hey, we're not going to support the latest hardware. We're not going to push the latest updates of core applications to the operating system. The reason why you use us is because we look like Mac, and we're really good at looking at Mac like Mac. So, I mean, if this is your cup of tea, that's great. My recommendation on this bad boy is a 4 out of 10. And I know it's like, well, it's less than half, but come on, man. I mean, I can't even run it on the latest hardware, and you're not the big. Like my big complaint with this version of Geary is it's very hard to delete your emails. I think you can only delete it in certain areas by highlighting it and pushing the delete button on your keyboard. However, on the later versions, because of feedback to Yorba, he actually included these features. And it would be nice for functionality to trickle into the currently supported version. So, like I said, some of you guys may sit around and say, it's artistic, it's beautiful, it's great. But like I said, the developers, they're so overly whelmed with building this distribution and building core applications, which are just, reality, a couple of them are core, but a lot of them are just rebadged Totem and Xnoise and Shotwell. That's all they really are. That they don't have time to make sure that the old distribution, or the current, I don't want to say old, currently supported distribution, is getting the latest in kernel updates, so you can run it on the latest hardware. And like I said, there's no excuse for, oh, well, it's a matter of stability because, well, the Ubuntu core that you're using has been proven to be stable running the latest kernel for it, or at least kernel 3.10. What it is you're not sure if, with an update to the X display server, if Pantheon will render in it, which when I tried to install it, it didn't work. Now, your experience may differ. You may be able to run that update and get it, and it'll work fine. So, all the power to you. If you like it, that's great. But like I said, I don't believe in using distributions, especially ones that ask for donation upon download, that are not providing me the latest and greatest of the open source and Linux community on a the only supported version of the operating system they're offering. It's bullcrap. So anyway, I'm going to make these videos once a week. Next week, I'm going to be covering Manjaro Linux. It's a great way if you're looking for an alternative to Ubuntu, and something different, because it's not a Debian-based distribution. And I think they may have, in the future, something very compelling, and I can guarantee you they're going to get a better review than Elementary OS. I don't even know what it is about these Mac lookalikes, because Pear OS was about just as bad in my opinion. But we'll be covering that, and we'll be showing some easier ways to install Arch. And what I'd like to see is some feedback. Now, there's no reason to be flaming me because I'm pointing out legit facts here. And there's no reason, if I did make any little complaint about OS X, can't remember if I did. There's no reason to do the whole OS X versus Linux argument. But if you do find some inaccuracy in my video, please let me know. And if you are curious about other distributions that you would like to see me kind of go in and look at the under the hood, not what lays on top like some reviewers do, go ahead and post that up. I'd appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.